hundreds of millions of pounds to Rwanda, and now they're saying, oh, sorry, we've got to stagger it. We can only take a few for now. Oh, let's slow down the scheme. They should not be calling the shots on this. Surely Britain should be, if we're the ones dishing out the money.
Do you know what this is, though? This is Britain projecting weakness. It's exactly like the EU negotiations. If we'd had presented a united front, Parliament wasn't bickering with itself. What Kigali has seen here is that, hang on, the House of Lords are trying to stop this. The Labour Party are leading in the polls. They want to reverse it, undo it if they get into power. They see, and quite rightly perhaps in their view, this is an opportunity to squeeze more money out of the Brits for their end of the bargain, doing even less. If this hadn't been amended 10 times in the House of Lords, would Rwanda be saying what it is saying today about slowing the whole thing down?
Well, they did threaten to shut off the whole scheme, didn't they? Because of the bad PR they were getting, which is understandable too, but I guess it's just that those threats, when we're spending so much money on this scheme, really wound me up this morning. But let us know what you make of it, or gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you get the idea that it's actually Rwanda who are calling the shots when it comes to this scheme? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. But let's get your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 12. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. The Prime Minister says his focus is on the future of the country.
I'm not interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
In Warwickshire, the Prime Minister announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. Labour says after 14 years of Tory economic failure, small firms were finding things harder and harder. But Mr Sunak says the government is taking action and will pay the full cost of apprenticeships for people aged 21 or under at small firms from the 1st of April. In other news, the Foreign Secretary has criticised the Russian presidential election result, saying it wasn't free or fair. Early results showed Vladimir Putin won nearly 88% of the vote, giving him a 5th term in office. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said he's behaving like a modern-day Stalin and accused Putin of stealing the election after having opponents imprisoned or murdered. Thousands of people turned up at polling stations in Russia and cities across the world to protest the result. The Kremlin responded by promising to imprison anyone taking part for up to 5 years. Former Kremlin advisor and Russian exile Valery Morozov says there is no viable opposition to Putin.
The problem is that Putin is still keeping Russia moving, developing, or in any case. Well, there is no alternative. There is no people who have ideas, other ideas. You have Putin. Russia is now, if you compare the development of Russia, for example, from January 2023 to this January, it is 4.6% development.
Now, Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The athlete posted the news on Instagram, saying it was time to move on. The 5-time gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer, but the 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. We could see flying taxis take to the skies in 2 years under the government's new drones plan. The Department for Transport is proposing flying taxis without pilots on board by 2030 as part of its Future of Flight Action Plan. It says the plan would mean the adoption of technology that was once confined to the realms of science fiction. And a state of emergency has been declared in southern Iceland after another volcanic eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula. It's the fourth eruption since December and follows weeks of warnings from the Met Office that magma was accumulating under the ground, making an eruption likely. The eruption site is near Grindavik, a coastal town of 3,800 people, about 30 miles southwest of Iceland's capital of Reykjavik. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Is the Prime Minister fighting for his political life? Rishi Sunak has delivered a landmark speech aimed at boosting British business, pledging to create 20,000 more apprenticeships for young people and cut some red tape for small businesses. Well, is that sort of announcement going to turn the tide?
Well, I'm not so sure, Tom. I mean, you know, apprenticeships, very important. Very important. We saw him focus on A-levels and maths to age 18, so why not also focus on apprenticeships? We know far too many people, in my humble opinion, are going to university. A boost in apprenticeships is all right. Is this enough to turn a corner for Rishi Sunak? He hopes it is.
But this is the week that matters. The Prime Minister's grip on power in the United Kingdom is clearly increasingly tenuous as rumours continue to grow that rebel Conservative MPs will attempt to oust him before the next election. Penny Mordaunt is said to be the preferred candidate to replace Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister.
Do you know what that's based on, Tom? We've got Penny Mordaunt everywhere. Apparently Penny Mordaunt is waiting in the wings. Last week it was Kemi Badenoch. Some people are talking about David Cameron
coming in from the
coming
Lords.
In from the sidelines, coming in from the Lords. Penny Mordaunt, is there some truth to this, that she's waiting there?
Well, she has stood to be leader of the Conservative
That's
Party
true.
Twice. She came second to Rishi Sunak when he stood. Didn't quite get the right number of nominations to get through. You needed 100 nominations at that emergency replacement contest. But she is, by most polls, the most popular choice of all of the MPs who could replace him.
Not within the Conservative Party, though, right? Perhaps within the public.
I've seen polls of the public, but she also does very well on cabinet rankings with Conservative Home members' surveys. There is something quite attractive about her as sort of a leader. She looks prime ministerial in a way that many other candidates don't.
And she likes a union flag.
She does.
So there you go. Shall we speak to Chief Political Correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, who I believe is joining us now. Aubrey, thank you very much indeed. So tell us, how much truth is there to this Penny Mordaunt story? Is she very much waiting? Does she have the support of the party? Could she be the one to oust the Prime Minister?
There is certainly something in this. I mean, people who advocate this plan basically say that lots of the other leadership contenders have the luxury of time, i.e. they might be able to launch a challenge or potentially run for the leadership after the general election when the Conservatives are presumed to be facing a significant defeat. Penny Mordaunt is in a more precarious situation in that her majority is much more fragile, and she might therefore not necessarily be around to try and attempt to run for the leadership after the general election. So time is potentially a bit more pressing for her. Now, her allies say that all of this has been completely cooked up, that, OK, maybe she is potentially sort of getting ready in case there is a leadership contest, but it's not fair to say that she is in any way stirring the pot or trying to get rid of Rishi Sunak herself. And it's quite hard for a sort of leadership challenge to be launched without the person who is supposed to be replacing Rishi Sunak giving it their full backing.
Now, the other name in the mix is, of course, Kemi Badenoch, but it seems that her star might have dimmed recently, particularly with this morning's media round. She wasn't given stark reviews, but perhaps that's her pitch, a more combative, abrasive form of leadership, willing to take on the media.
So there is a sort of old adage in politics, which is he or she who wields the knife never wears the crown. And effectively in politics, I suppose, there's a concern that if you are the person who launches the putsch, then you won't be the person who ends up being received and welcomed by the leaders. So Kemi Badenoch's sort of style, if you like, has been to be incredibly publicly loyal to Rishi Sunak. And she's certainly been one of the more fervent in trying to sort of slap down the speculation about a future leadership contest. We haven't heard anything from Penny Mordaunt quite so specifically and on the record on this subject, but allies of hers tell me that she thinks it's all nonsense and that ultimately it isn't doing anyone any favours. But Kemi Badenoch is the sort of presumed candidate who would probably lead the field and probably have the sort of choice, be the choice of the Conservative members if it went to a vote further down the line. But she clearly decides that ultimately she doesn't want to see Rishi Sunak go this side of a general election and would rather wait.
Presumably, Aubrey, because after an election, Penny Mordaunt might have lost her seat, whereas Kemi's in one of the safest seats in the country. It's hers for the losing if she waits for after the election, building back sort of a defeated party. But frankly, a lot of her potential opponents will be out.
And this is what Rishi Sunak allies are briefing the papers, aren't they? Hold your horses, don't go for Rishi Sunak. He'll just call an early election and you might be out of your seat.
And that's been one of the most interesting things, is about not just the battle for hearts and minds of sitting current Conservative MPs, but the new crop of Conservative MPs who will be making up the parliamentary party after the general election, and therefore in a very significant position to be able to choose the next leader. Because, of course, the selection process itself is so dependent on what MPs decide to do, and we're seeing so many of them stand down, they're going to be replaced sort of en masse. So there is a lot of courting going on by potential leadership candidates of Conservative candidates who are likely to become the sort of new wave of MPs at the next election. The only other thing I'd say is that there is still the problem of the 2nd of May and the local elections, when Rishi Sunak expects sort of quite significant losses for the Conservative Party. One senior MP I spoke to recently said they thought that it was going to be a sort of moment like in 2019 when Theresa May performed disastrously for the Conservatives in the European Parliament elections. And the MP I spoke to said, we need the electorate to sort of deliver us a punishment beating, and that can be the spark that we use to get rid of the leader. So I think the real moment of danger for Rishi Sunak on the horizon is in about 6 weeks' time.
Well, those 6 weeks will be perhaps the most crucial of his political life. But for now, Aubrey Allegretti, thank you very much for talking us through those issues. Really, really stark choices facing the Prime Minister and the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's discuss this further with pollster at Savanta, Chris Hopkins, who has his finger on the pulse of what the public are thinking. Chris, thank you very much indeed. Rishi Sunak, all the newspapers this morning reporting that this is a massive day, a massive week, and of course a massive month for him in terms of attempting to turn around his fate at the polls. How's it looking? Does he stand a chance in hell of turning this around?
Well, look, never say never, but, you know, all of the polls, I think, at the minute are pointing to a Conservative wipeout at the next general election. I think, you know, Samantha, we were about to host a local elections briefing, and I was reflecting on the one that we hosted last year, and it seemed like this time last year, there was a semblance of things starting to turn around for Rishi Sunak. You know, the Labour lead in polling tended to be in the low teens. The Conservative vote share was consistently above 30 points. Our latest voting intention this year showed, you know, a 17-point lead. We've had 18-point leads for the Labour Party in recent weeks, and the Conservative vote share hit 25%, which is the lowest that we'd seen since the last throes of the Liz Truss government. You know, Rishi Sunak hasn't really ever been able to turn things around from there. If, in fact, you know, since his sort of early good start, things have tended to go backwards. And I think it's therefore no surprise that there are consistent rumours about his status as the Conservative Party leader and therefore Prime Minister. And I think a bad set of local election results in a few weeks' time could perhaps be the final nail in the coffin for him.
Chris, it is hard to overstate the significance of local elections. As Aubrey said last time, when was it? In 2019, the local elections, well, it was only a few days after those that Theresa May announced she was leaving as Prime Minister. Indeed, the local elections this time last year were almost the peak of Rishi Sunak's popularity as Prime Minister. After then, you can see a precipitated decline in the Conservative vote share across all pollsters. This could really be a turning point.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you both have just touched on it in terms of Conservative members of Parliament, those that aren't retiring, are worried about losing their seats, and ultimately, local elections, they're not across the whole of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but they do absolutely create a mood music. They create a mood music within the Conservative Party. That mood hasn't been particularly good at all this year, and if there is a bad set of local election results, things are only going to get worse. I think a few weeks ago, we were potentially looking at a series of events that, if it all conspired to go well for Rishi Sunak, we could have well been looking at him striking while the iron's hot and going for a May general election. But ultimately, the budget fell pretty flat. The Rwanda vote is going to continue to go through the Commons, but whether the government end up with the resolution with that policy remains to be seen. And ultimately, they need to be seen to be delivering on some of their key pledges, and they're not at the minute. And then a bad set of local election results, as anticipated, really, on the 2nd of May. All of those things just conspire to create a really bad mood in the Conservative Party. And therefore, as I say, it's no surprise that some backbenchers are wondering, well, is it worth us rolling the dice with a new leader, because we seem to be facing pending defeat at the next general election, so why not roll the dice with someone else?
And Chris, just very quickly, lots of talk about a return of Nigel Farage to frontline politics. What proportion of the electorate could he get to vote for him?
Look, I think, in the polling community at the minute, there's still a huge question mark about reform. Are they a Conservative protest vote, or are they a legitimate party? And I think it's really difficult to assess the impact that one person, one leader could end up having. But I do think that in terms of what Nigel Farage represents, he does increase reform's legitimacy, and I think they would be a far greater threat at local elections, or indeed at a general election, if he was heavily involved, whether that's as leader or otherwise. So yeah, I think that if he was to make a return to frontline politics, I think that could spell even worse news for the Conservative Party come the general election.
Really stark stuff there. Chris, thanks for joining us. Let's go from one Chris to another now, because Christopher Hope, our political editor, can join us live from Downing Street. Chris, you've just left an official briefing with the Prime Minister's official spokesman. What was said?
So this week for the government, it's all about the Rwanda bill tonight, Tom and Emily, and good morning to you both. What we're being told is the government is now starting to contact a cohort of people who could be deported to Rwanda. So finally, we're edging into view flights taking off. Of course, 2 prime ministers ago, when Boris Johnson was running the country in April 2022, this idea first emerged. Fast forward nearly 2 years, we're facing the possibility of flights finally being taken off if they can get this through the Parliament starting tonight. We're expecting 2.5 hours of voting starting at 8 p.m, a debate before that, when Tory MPs are expected to unite to vote down the 10 amendments tabled in the House of Lords. They'll then go back to the Lords on Wednesday, and it could go back to the Commons again on Wednesday evening. So it's a big week here, I think, for the PM Rishi Sunak to try and take the focus away from the House of Commons and back to the governing and delivering on his promise as Prime Minister.
Christopher, we're hearing quite a lot in the papers about how Rwanda is quite demanding when it comes to the scheme. They're essentially insisting that the scheme is slowed down. They're not ready to have all these people. They want to do a sort of try before you buy type thing. Take a few, see how it is, and then maybe take some more. It does seem like Kigali is calling the shots.
Well, it's obviously a two-way treaty with Rwanda, isn't it? The memorandum of understanding with Kigali is that they would try and make sure that they can handle the numbers being flown over. They can see the political imperative is on the government here to get hundreds of people taken to Rwanda, not just dozens in the run-up to the next election. That's probably why they're saying that. But it's very clear, I think, that there's a chance here for the government to get back on the front foot. What they are making clear in meetings I've been having is that as soon as this bill becomes law, and it should do, subject to them being ordered to use a Parliament Act, there may be further challenges in the courts on each of the individuals identified in the cohort. So it will be weeks away if it can get through the House of Commons and Parliament this week before the Easter break, which starts next week.
And Chris, There is all of this speculation in the midst of this about Rishi Sunak's own future. This big speech this morning was perhaps an attempt to draw the conversation away, talk about the things that the government's doing, but frankly, over the weekend, fevered speculation of who might replace Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt's name being thrown around all over the place.
That's right, Tom and Emily, and as you know, when the herd moves, it moves in politics. And I did feel over the weekend, I didn't really believe all this stuff about Penny Mordaunt, despite writing a piece for our website back on the 25th of January about the idea of a contract with Britain, that Penny Mordaunt could be installed to replace Rishi Sunak, and after 100 days there will be a general election. That was all just chatter, I think, among discontented MPs. But there's a feeling of momentum at the moment in Parliament. It's a very febrile place. I've been told from two sources that as many as 40 letters might have gone in to Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1910-22 committee. If that number goes above 53, there'll be a vote of no confidence in Mr Sunak as Tory leader. That is the situation we're in. Someone else said there's a 50-50 chance of him surviving until a November general election. So it is very risky, it feels like, in Parliament for the PM. The reason why that is that MPs are going home. They're campaigning for the local elections. The purdah period starts tomorrow for local elections. That means MPs are on the doorstep, they're talking to people, they're finding for themselves, being forced to find out the real feelings about Rishi Sunak, and it's not very pleasant for them. I think that's driving some of this chat. They also know they can replace a leader very easily and quickly in the Tory party. That means we've had 3 prime ministers in 5 years, but it also means that shows that Labour can't do that. They stuck with Jeremy Corbyn through 2 losing elections, and that's why I think the Tory party is so relentlessly successful at elections. When someone isn't working, they change that person, and that's why the chatter right now in Parliament is that very thing.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor there. 40 letters, maybe, already with Graham Brady.
Although, I suppose it is always speculation.
Speculation.
The only person who knows is the keeper of the letters himself, Sir Graham Brady.
Well, there you go. But coming up, the political ping-pong continues, but is Rwanda holding all the balls? We'll find out. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Welcome back to Headliners. And Paul, we're going to get straight into Monday's mail for some good old-fashioned, traditional male breastfeeding.
Yeah. To answer the question, what is the latest woke hell, Josh? Row as hospitals say hormone-filled milk from trans women who were born male is just as good for a baby as the real thing. It's possible for men, if they pump themselves full of estrogen, to grow larger breast tissue, and they often do. If
or you just eat lots of burgers.
Exhibit A. And once you've done that, it is actually then possible to express or lactate a liquid. Okay. If to that liquid you then add another load of pills, medication, chemicals, whatever, that lactation juice can be fed to a baby.
We don't really... This is not for the sake of the baby. The baby has no benefits from this whatsoever. The studies are very weak on it. It's a bit worrying because, you know, when hospitals started indulging in homeopathy and having, the NHS had homeopathic hospitals, that was worrying because they're supposed to be a trusted authority. And before saying something like this, there should be an awful lot of study done.
I want to shame this hospital. This is
whether it's necessary.
University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. That's who it is. And they have written one of the stupidest sentences I have read aloud in the 2 years that I've been privileged to do this show. It says, the term human milk is meant to be neutral and not gender biased.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Oh, my God, we're laughing at you.
I mean, and as someone says here, babies are not props. And that's the scary thing. And when we're not focusing primarily on the health of a baby.
No, but the feeling of a person doing it rather than... It's a bit of an odd way to go, isn't it? So...
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 12, and the political ping-pong of Rishi Sunak's Rwanda bill returns to the House of Commons today.
Yes, MPs will debate recommendations made by the House of Lords, of which there were many, which require the government to prove that Rwanda is safe before deportation flights are allowed. It comes as new analysis reveals the true costs of the scheme, expected to hit the billions, with one deportation now estimated to be £230,000, although we don't know if that number is completely accurate, but either way, it's very high.
But the bill could become law by Thursday if MPs vote in favour of those amendments to the bill that went through the House of Lords, although that's not really likely to happen. Meanwhile, it's being reported that if the scheme gets the green light, this is the crucial bit, the Rwanda government want a 2-month pause following the first arrivals to, as they say, ensure a smooth process.
Yeah, so they used quite a lot of different verbs, reports of this. They stagger it, slow it down, space it out.
Surprised they're not saying a humanitarian pause, but there we go. Shall we get some of the detail on this from our political correspondent, Olivia Utley? Because, Olivia, the surprising thing, perhaps, we knew that the Lords amended this a lot. We know it's coming to the Commons today. Perhaps the surprising thing is Rwanda sensing weakness here, trying to slow it all down?
Well, I think that's absolutely a possibility. It sounds as though what's going to happen is there are these 10 amendments which the Lords made to the bill, which essentially was designed to water the bill down. And one of the most important amendments of those 10 was an amendment which said that no migrants could be deported to Rwanda until a treaty that the United Kingdom had signed with Rwanda had been fully implemented. And that treaty was a treaty that Rwanda is signing, saying that it will not move migrants on to another country. That is something which is illegal under international law. And until Rwanda had signed that treaty saying that it would not do that, then the bill was said to be illegal. Now, that is the one amendment of these 10 which are going to the Commons tonight, which it looks as though some Conservative MPs might actually back. The expectation is that all of these amendments will be voted down in the Commons tonight, paving the way for a smooth path to this bill onto the third reading. But actually, Robert Buckland, former Justice Secretary, is saying that he might actually vote for the amendment, which would mean that Rwanda has to legally implement this treaty before any migrants are deported. And it could be for that reason that Rwanda is now saying that it wants to slow things down. The Kigali government is saying that they would only like to see 100 migrants deported at the beginning so that they can allow the scheme to bed in. It might be that, as you say, Rwanda is sort of sensing a bit of weakness here, and obviously the incentives for Rwanda to take hundreds and hundreds of migrants aren't that high. Quite a lot of the money for the scheme has already been paid to Rwanda. But it could also be that Rwanda thought at some point that it might have had a bit of a loophole, that it might have been able to send migrants on to a third country. And now that there is this amendment going through the House of Lords, now going through the House of Commons, it's thinking, well, hang on a minute, this actually might be more difficult for us to house all sorts of refugees than we were originally thinking. So even if the bill does get through this final stages in the House of Commons, it might go back to the Lords, might just be passed tonight in the Commons. Either way, it does look like it'll be passed soon. But even when that happens, the problem is far from off Rishi Sunak's plate, because Kigali itself is now slowing down the process.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley, our political correspondent there, live from Westminster. It does feel as though things are kicking on, though. that it is becoming a real possibility that flights will take off. You've got the Home Office making phone calls, contacting some of the first people who may be on those flights if they do happen, if they do get off the ground. You've got it, you know, coming back with the amendments from the Lords. They're going to pass it through again.
It does seem
ping pong.
that several months ago we were talking about if these flights ever go. Now we're talking about how many of these flights will go. I think it does seem now odds on that there will be flights sent to Rwanda. But the criticism of people like Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick when the Rwanda bill was being passed, the safety of Rwanda bill was being passed, the criticism wasn't there won't be any flights going. It will be, will there be regular, unfettered, unadulterated flights going? And I think that's still the big political question. If it's just a trickle of a handful of people, is it the deterrent that it would be if there were thousands of people going?
Yes, and if there are more conditions placed on this treaty from the Rwandan side, then that, of course, makes it more difficult. But we shall see. We'll bring you the latest as we get it. But coming up, Labour's tax raid on private schools could end up costing the taxpayer a whopping £1.6 billion. Is this the politics of envy back again?
It's 12:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. The Prime Minister says his focus is on the future of the country.
I'm not interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
In Coventry, the Prime Minister also announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. And Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The five-time gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer, but the 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Nana are queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
So after his mad dash to see his father last week, Prince Harry predictably went on TV to talk about it. He gave his first interview to Good Morning America, whilst apparently being filmed by a crew that were doing a documentary on the Invictus Games. He didn't disclose his father's diagnosis, but frankly, even the fact that he was on TV talking about it was concerning. No wonder they're keeping him at arm's length. This is what he said.
How did you get the news that the king was ill?
I spoke to him.
And what did you do next?
I jumped on a plane and went to go and see him as soon as I could.
How was that visit for you emotionally?
Look, I love my family. The fact that I was able to get on a plane and go and see him and spend any time with him, I'm grateful for that.
An illness in the family can have a galvanizing or sort of reunifying effect for a family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible in this case?
Yeah, I'm sure. Throughout all these families, I see it on a day-to-day basis. The strength of the family unit coming together.
He also said that he loves his family, but then he said that he had his own family in America. So which family does he love? The late Queen's last few years of life were marred with accusations of racism, which Harry later backtracked on, claiming that they hadn't actually used the word, so inadvertently admitting to gaslighting us all. But the Sussex's stock is falling in the States, and the only thing that makes them interesting is their proximity to the royal family. And now the king is ill, Harry has even offered to muck in and take on official duties to help his father. Look, I want to see reconciliation and love and joy, but I'm afraid Meghan has yet to even speak to her father as far as we know, and Harry didn't apparently even reach out to his brother. Whilst his dad might fall for it, I doubt William will be as soft. Good luck with that, Harry.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 12:37. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily, and him, Tom. Now, in an attempt to boost British business, Rishi Sunak has today pledged to create 20,000 new apprenticeships and cut red tape for small businesses.
Yeah, during his speech, his big relaunch speech at the Business Connect conference in Warwickshire, the Prime Minister also acknowledged that things were still tough for businesses, but insisted that the government's plan was starting to work.
Well, we can go live to Coventry now and speak to GB News presenter Pip Thompson, who is with small business owners. Pip, where are you? Tell me what the reaction has been.
Good afternoon, Emily. I am with a lot of small businesses because this is the Federation of Small Businesses Business Boot Camp, which is taking place today in Warwickshire. Around 200 enterprises are here. It's a full-on day, listening to lots of speeches and such a cross-section of people. So I've grabbed a few of them. I want to talk to Joe, first of all. Joe is in Nuneaton in Warwickshire. Now, you've got a retail shop. Rishi Sunak said plenty of things, including about thousands more apprenticeships. Does it interest you what he had to say? What's your thoughts?
Yes, it does. I've had an apprentice before and she went on to do amazing things, and I would like to do that again. And at the moment, costs have been forefront and I've had to re-budget the business as it is at the moment. So to have a fully funded apprenticeship, that would be fantastic for us.
Conservatives are saying the economy's turned the corner. Are you hearing the right words from Rishi?
I think it may be a little bit too late. Obviously, there's the announcement with regards to the VAT and then the Women's Task Force, but we need to know more about that, and we could have done with this quite a few months ago.
Thank you, Joe. Susan, you've got an interesting business. You've got a swim school. Yeah, so in Coventry, in good old Coventry. So, what does it mean for you? What he had to say this morning?
Again, the apprenticeship bit's great. We've had apprentices in the past, so to get it fully funded will really help because we can get more staff on board, get more people into work. I really want to hear more about the VAT reliefs. I think we need to hear more. We need more support as a small business, especially one providing life-saving skills on relief for VAT and potentially corporation tax.
Is the Conservative Party the party for you when it comes to the economy?
There's the question at the minute, isn't it? There's the question. I think they're going the right way at the minute. I do actually think Rishi's doing a pretty good job compared to some of his predecessors. but I want to see more. We need more. We need more help.
Well, he's only just down the road, or has been down the road today. Maybe he's hearing some of this. Just want to bring in a couple of more people. There's so many people here that I've been trying to talk to. Let's talk to Kate. Now, Kate, you've got a coaching business. You're really interested in what you had to say about investing in women, this task force.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful idea. Women classically don't get the funding that they need at all stages. So from setting up the business right up to growth, men are so much more likely to get the funding they need for their business. Part of that is because the organisations that provide the private capital are really sort of mainly at the top levels are all sort of men. So actually there's a bias in there. So they talked about this, what else they're going to be able to do. So having a task force to address it is good, but I'd want to know more detail.
And Graham, you've got a online marketing agency. Is Rishi Sunak coming out with the right things for you, or are you a little bit disillusioned?
I'm a disillusioned business owner at the moment. I think the last 3 to 4 months I've seen a common delay in people's decision making. I think the economy is in a stalling moment. It needs confidence. If this gives confidence to the market, so people then go and make decisions, then great. But almost every single business owner I've spoken to since about October last year, the decisions aren't being made to buy from them, and also the employment is part of the employment is that you can't find the right people to work for your team.
So it's about recruitment.
Lots of people say to me, and I don't know where this comes from, they can't find the right people to work for them. So the apprenticeship scheme, great idea, but that's not going to help us right now.
Okay, great. Thanks very much to all of you. Do come back to us in the next hour or so, because there's lots more people we're going to talk to from a huge cross-section of businesses, and they have got plenty to say here on GB News.
We certainly will. Thank you very, very much, Pip, for bringing us those views from small businesses in the West Midlands.
Quite a lot of positivity, but some cynicism I sensed.
But I suppose everyone recognises it's a tough time.
Yeah.
Globally,
yeah.
It's a tough time. The interest rates in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in America, in Europe, they're all high. I mean, the cost of doing business has been going up in all of these places.
Yes, not everyone blames Rishi Sunak
for
all of their woes when it comes to their business or when it comes to their lives. Not everyone does. It may feel like that sometimes.
But do you know what's
because the government is always being bashed. But not everyone blames them.
You look around the world. Justin Trudeau over the weekend has been saying he hates his job and thinks about quitting daily. He's 20 points behind in the polls in Canada right now. You look at Martin Schulz in Germany, 20 points behind in the polls right now. You look at Emmanuel Macron. There is Marine Le Pen biting at his heels. You look at incumbents all around the world. Joe Biden is looking at losing an election to Donald Trump now, a man facing federal indictments. Wherever anyone is in power right now, at this stage of the global economy, frankly, good luck to them. They're facing an uphill battle.
Yes, hardly surprising, is it? We're going to get to some of your views very shortly, but coming up, we're dissecting a new report which warns Labour's tax raid on private schools could cost you billions. More to come after this break.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweep in and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild, but it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius, further south mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 12:46. Now, Labour's tax raid on private schools could cost the British taxpayer a whopping £1.6 billion a year.
Yeah, this is interesting. He wants to raise taxes, but there's a new report that says that this tax raise could actually lose money for the UK. So Keir Starmer's promised to introduce VAT on independent school fees, but the party claims that would generate £1.7 billion to put towards state schools. New analysis from the free market think tank, the Adam Smith Institute, claims that instead of raising £1.6 billion, it could actually cost about that much.
Who would have thought, eh? Should we get some more detail on that report from Sam Bidwell, who's from the Adam Smith Institute himself? Sam, thank you very much for joining us. So this might look curious to some. The Labour Party says it's going to save the taxpayer £1.7 billion. You say, actually, it's going to cost the taxpayer £1.6 billion.
That's right, and thank you both for speaking to me this afternoon about our new report. Well, look, existing modelling on this subject has assumed a static model whereby none of the effects that we might expect from an increase in tax on private schools will actually take effect. What we're saying is that things like migration from the independent sector to the state sector, things like the additional cost of teaching children who move into the state sector from the independent sector, and a bunch of other things that we've identified in the report will actually mean that it could cost the taxpayer money, particularly if we're looking at school closures.
Sort of second-order effects. If you look at the first-order effect, if you look at what this you're going to tax these schools, therefore we're going to get the tax revenue.
Money.
But there are effects of this tax, you're saying, that actually will end up costing the Exchequer money, and you lose all the benefits.
Well, that's exactly right. So let's take, for example, a small independent school, not one of the big ones that we like to think about and demonise, the Eatons, the Harrows, etc., thinking about the kind of bread and butter independent school that you see in much of the country. In those cases, an increase on VAT, putting VAT on independent school fees, could mean a closure, a bankruptcy. And so there you've got a loss of revenue to the Treasury off the back of that school in the first instance. You've also got the fact that hundreds of students will migrate then from that independent school into the state sector, which has huge cost implications. And that's not to mention the impact on tax take from those teachers who will therefore stop teaching in that independent school. Some of them might drop out of the system, some of them might take less lucrative work elsewhere. So across the board, those second-order impacts tell us that actually that there would be a huge cost to the taxpayer from this measure.
That's a good point. The teachers leaving the private sector, lower salary in the state sector, less money to the taxman. So why are Labour doing this then? Is it just ideology? Is it the politics of envy? What is it, if actually the numbers don't really stack up for them?
Well, look, I wouldn't wish to prescribe to anybody the reasons for pursuing this particular policy. It's not just the Labour Party. It's not about any party in particular. People have suggested for a number of years now that VAT ought to be levied on independent school fees. There is some existing modelling from the IFS which suggests that this would have a minimal impact and would raise money for the Treasury. In fact, that report is based on what the IFS itself admits to be thin and sparse evidence, which The Economist calls a guess, and the bulk of that research is based on a 2002 report into American Catholic schools. So what we have here is a lack of information on the subject. We've got people saying, well, actually, private schools have had it too good for too long. Let's give the middle classes a kicking, where actually at the root of this is a whole bunch of families who are just about struggling to get by and who are saving the Treasury £28,000 a year on average through their decision to put their children through independent school rather than to school them through the state sector.
Too often it's forgotten that people who pay for independent schools are paying twice. They're paying taxes to fund other kids going to school, and they're paying for their kids to go privately.
Absolutely.
But Sam Bidwell, thank you so much for talking us through that really interesting report there from the Adam Smith Institute.
Now, in other news, following an alarming spate of stabbings in Bristol recently, a woman fighting against knife crime has successfully campaigned to get bleed kits put in schools.
Well, this comes just 2 days... this comes just days after 2 more men were injured in a fresh knife attack in the city. There seems to have been a spate of stabbings.
Now, we're now joined by the founder of the Bristol Bleed Kit campaign, Leanne Reynolds. Leanne, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. It's absolutely shocking to think that school children need to know how to deal with stabbing wounds. It's not a great state of affairs, is it?
No, what we're doing is we're teaching them. So I brought catastrophic bleed kits to the city in 2021. And what we're doing, we're teaching young people and professionals and adults how to use a catastrophic bleed kit. It could be for stab wounds, it could be for any other accidents. So it's for any catastrophic bleed. And we are teaching them and training them how to use them if they need to.
It's really staggering to see the numbers coming out of places like Bristol that, but basically any large city in the United Kingdom has seen just a staggering number of stabbings. How do people respond, communities respond to the new introduction of kits like yours, of these bleed kits? Because, frankly, perhaps even a decade ago, this didn't seem to be as big of an issue.
No, I've got a good response. The community's behind me, so I'm not funded. I'm community-based. The NHS bought the first 150 kits. I now have businesses, and like you said, schools are coming on board. We're making them accessible. They're in locked cabinets, and they are publicly accessible. If you call 999, you will be directed to a call if someone's bleeding. And the training, you don't need training, but we are offering it so you are aware of what's inside that kit. So God forbid if you have to use one, which we hope you don't, it is available and you are fully aware of the contents and what each item does inside.
And we're just running out of time, sadly, but how receptive are the children? Do they understand the gravity of what's going on the streets? Do they understand why it's so relevant to be prepared?
Yeah, the children are, it's been great. I've received great feedback. We now have a campaign out, so we are requesting that government makes it in the curriculum, that all children learn first aid, basic first aid skills, CPR and bleed kit training. At the moment, the whole country is experiencing serious violence, so it would benefit up and down.
Well, Leanne Reynolds, founder of the Bristol Bleed Kit campaign, thank you so much for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain.
It sounds like Leanne's doing amazing work. It's just such a sorry state of affairs that this is needed.
Yes, it's almost like we're sort of accepted this level of gang violence, this level of knife crime, and it's almost like we're sort of necessarily dealing with the symptoms of that problem, but it reminds me of American schools doing, you know, training for school shooters, just sort of accepting that this is the state of affairs. Yeah,
not great, but coming up, Sunak fights for his political life with a speech insisting this will be the year Britain bounces back. Will it?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweep in and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild, but it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius, further south mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 18th of March.
Rishi Sunak fights for his political life with a speech insisting this will be the year Britain, quotes, bounces back. But with sharks circling, calling for his head, could Penny Mordaunt swap her sword for the crown?
Could she indeed? And Margaret Thatcher has been listed as a Punch and Judy villain alongside Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden in a display hosted by London's prestigious V&A Museum, headed up by former Labour MP Tristan Hunt.
And there are reports that the Princess of Wales has been seen out and about, shopping. It comes as speculation continues to grow over the state of her health. Now, Rishi Sunak has said that the UK is, quotes, bouncing back. And I thought, Emily, this morning when I heard that, where have I heard that before? Well, have a look at this. The front page of a satirical, quote-unquote, autobiography by Alan Partridge. And I do think the Prime Minister has opened himself up to a certain amount of ridicule here, perhaps. Bouncing back.
You know what? I think you've opened yourself up to a little bit of ridicule there by that being the first thing that jumps to mind.
Alan Partridge is an institution.
He is an institution.
He is an institution,
right.
But also, I mean, it's every broadcaster's fear to be compared to Alan Partridge. But I think that the Prime Minister might have walked into a bit of a Partridge moment there, bouncing back when. How many people believe that this is sort of a great resurgence, a great bounce back?
Well, it's certainly there's a lot for it to bounce back too.
It's true.
With the polls, 18%, the last one I saw for the Conservative parties. That's fewer than 1 in 5 people are planning to vote Conservative. Perhaps when it comes down to it, and it is Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak, he may be able to claw back a little bit more of the vote share, but it's not looking great, is it?
But it's like all of these ministers who saw the 0.2% growth last month, or in January this year, and saying, OK, we've exited recession most likely on these numbers, but hooray, you know, sort of cheering 0.2%. I mean, there's just a rounding error between recession and not.
Also, the population's increased about 1 million in that time, so you would have hoped that GDP would be given a bit of a boost just by virtue of there being more people. But apparently not. Let us know what you make of it all. Is Rishi Sunak a bit like Alan Partridge? GBViews at GBnews.com, but first your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. The Prime Minister says his focus is on the future of the country.
I'm not interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
In Coventry, the Prime Minister announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. Labour's accused the government of economic failure, but Mr Sunak says action is being taken and the full cost of apprenticeships will be paid for people aged under 21 at small firms from the 1st of April. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch backed the Prime Minister and his plan.
Thank you to the Prime Minister because the efforts that he is making to advance opportunity across our United Kingdom, to champion innovation and aspiration, and to build a society in which the hard work of all our small business owners is recognised and rewarded is absolutely critical. And I say that because it's the businesses represented in this room today, from Lucky Saint to Libby London, that are the backbone of our economy.
In other news, the Foreign Secretary has criticised the Russian election results, saying it wasn't free and fair. Early results showed President Vladimir Putin won nearly 88% of the vote, giving him a fifth term in office. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he's behaving like a modern-day Stalin, and he accused Putin of stealing the election after having opponents imprisoned or murdered. Thousands of people turned up at polling stations in Russia and cities across the world to protest the result. The Kremlin responded by promising to imprison anyone taking part for up to 5 years. Former Kremlin advisor and Russian exile Valery Morozov says there is no viable option against Putin.
The problem is that Putin is still keeping Russia moving, developing, or in any case. Well, there is no alternative. There is no people who have ideas, other ideas. You have Putin. Russia is now, if you compare the development of Russia, for example, from January 2023 to this January, it is 4.6% development.
Now, Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The athlete posted the news on Instagram, saying it was time to move on. The five-time gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer, but the 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. We could see flying taxis take to the skies in 2 years under government's new drone plans. The Department for Transport is proposing flying taxis without pilots on board by 2030 as part of its Future of Flight Action Plan. It says the plan would mean the adoption of technology that was once confined to the realms of science fiction. And a state of emergency has been declared in southern Iceland after another volcanic eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula. It's the fourth eruption since December and follows weeks of warnings from the Met Office that magma was accumulating under the ground, making an eruption likely. The eruption site is near Grindavik, a coastal town of 3,800 people, about 30 miles southwest of Iceland's capital, Reykjavik. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1, and we're asking, is the Prime Minister fighting for his political life?
And you've been getting in touch. And John says, well, this is actually on Sunak and apprenticeships.
Yeah.
He says, why is it under Margaret Thatcher no one under 18 got benefits unless they were on a YTS scheme? A YTS scheme, is that an apprenticeship type scheme, I imagine?
I'm not old enough
Why
to know.
can't they make an apprenticeship available to every person that's signing on at a DWP centre to build all those hundreds of thousands of houses we need? The Tories are too soft. Youth training scheme, that's exactly it. The Tories are too soft. Well, lots of people would agree with you. I do think if you refuse a job time and time again, you know, could be put to worse use, couldn't you?
You certainly could.
Building a house.
Well, we're also talking about Rwanda today, and Clark has got in touch to say when someone is an illegal, then the first safe land they are in, they need to stay. Now, how many countries do they have to cross to get into the UK? That's a common refrain.
That is a common refrain. And we were also talking about how in Bristol there have been so many stabbings that now we have people going into schools with bleed kits to teach students how to deal with wounds, which is quite something. Ken says, when I was in school, we learned how to ride a bicycle properly and how to cross the road. Now they're taught how to deal with stabbings. My goodness, what has gone wrong? I think that sums it up, to be honest. Ken?
My parents taught me to ride a bike.
My dad taught me how to ride a bike, I think.
At school, I did quadratic equations, if I can say that. Quadratic equations. I don't know, riding a bike? Did school teach people to ride bikes?
No, maybe in some schools. Actually, no, you're right. It was a family affair. Yeah. Or your older brother or your older sister, whatever. And Adrian, just on the Rwanda, says, I'm wondering how they'll get people onto the planes. If they're kicking and screaming, not all will want to go voluntarily. I think that's a very good point too. Actually, in practice, the logistics of forcing people who probably don't want to make the trip onto a plane off to Rwanda, that could be another hiccup.
It could be a hiccup, although apparently there's been training schemes. There have been aircraft hangars commandeered by the government so that employees of the government or indeed contractors can practice practice getting resistant people onto these trains.
Oh gosh, yeah. I remember reading about that one.
No, well, let's get back to our top story today. The Prime Minister, just how much trouble is he really in?
Well, he's delivered a speech today that's aimed at boosting British businesses, pledging to create up to 20,000 more apprenticeships for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. He wants to unlock a tidal wave of opportunity across the United Kingdom.
However, there are sharks, and they're seemingly circling around the Prime Minister as rumours continue to grow that rebel Conservative MPs will attempt to oust him before the next election. Now, Penny Mordaunt is said to be their preferred candidate to become the Conservative Party leader.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, on this. Olivia, there's been headline after headline about the Prime Minister and the precarious position he's in. Do you think it's a realistic possibility that the Conservatives may swap in someone else?
Well, Conservative MPs that I've spoken to are very keen to talk down any talk of a sort of concerted effort to remove the Prime Minister before the next election. Publicly, they are all saying that they stand with Rishi Sunak. That said, there are certainly some whisperings going on behind the scenes. Morale has never really been lower in the Conservative Party. They are at rock bottom in the polls, as low as they were in the aftermath of Liz Truss's disastrous budget. And those poll ratings just show no signs of changing. That budget that was delivered a couple of weeks ago was intended to give the Tories a bit of a boost, but that boost just hasn't materialised. And it's now minds are turning towards those local elections at the start of May. And Conservative MPs are sort of thinking, well, you know, we up until now have said that it would be very bad to get in another Conservative Prime Minister, the fourth in as many years. But at this point, they're beginning to say, well, hang on a minute, what if Rishi Sunak tanks at the polls on May the 2nd, as most people are predicting, as the polls are very much predicting? Then perhaps the worst case scenario is to leave him in office. So then we get to the talk of who might replace him. Now, Penny Mordaunt is seen as a sort of uniting candidate. She's popular with the centrist moderates in the party, but also she has some sway with the right. The speech that she did at party conference was very much sort of in the image of Margaret Thatcher. And although some on the right are a bit sceptical of her because of her views on the trans issue, it seems as though some of them are coming round. The other good thing about Penny Mordaunt, as far as the Conservatives are concerned, is that she has very little to lose. She may be willing to put herself forward before a general election because she has a very small majority once the boundaries have been changed. And on current predictions, she is likely to lose her seat at a general election. So she might be one of the few people willing to put her head above the parapet before a general election. That said, obviously the risk with that is that they do put Penny Mordaunt in place of Rishi Sunak before the election and she loses her seat. If a sitting Prime Minister lost her seat at the election, it would be pretty disastrous for the Conservative Party. But some MPs are clearly feeling now is the moment for that final roll of the dice.
Really interesting stuff there. I can't remember a single election in British history where the Prime Minister has lost his seat. It did happen in Canada in 1993, but that was when the governing Conservative Party went from in government to just 2 seats. Perhaps that is facing the Tories.
A little bit of trivia
Who
for
knows?
you.
Olivia Utley, thank you for bringing us that. Those local elections are going to be such an important point. And it is interesting what Olivia said about Penny
They're going to be a
perhaps being
bloodbath,
the
let's be
only
realistic.
one who would want to take them into the general election. Because I think if you're a Conservative, if you're someone like Kemi Badenoch, and everyone talks about you as a potential future leader, why would you want to take the reins at the worst possible time, only to lead into a near-certain defeat? Wouldn't you want to take the reins after that defeat and build back? Whereas that might not be an option for Penny, so she would want to do it beforehand and try and hope to make the defeat less bad.
Exactly, and I think any Conservatives are misguided if they think that swapping in a new leader at this stage is going to reverse the current situation or change it
Reverse it entirely, but it could change.
Because there's a branding problem, isn't there, that goes far beyond Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss or Boris Johnson or any of the leaders that we've had. It's about the brand itself and about the Conservative Party. Whether they deserve to be where they are, that's up to people at home to decide, but that's how it is.
As we've discussed, sort of every incumbent around the world seems to be having a really tough time. In Germany, Martin Schulz is 20 points behind in the polls. In Canada, Justin Trudeau is 20 points behind in the polls. In the United States of America, even with their growing economy, Joe Biden looks like he's going to lose to Donald Trump. So this is something that is occurring just about everywhere in the world, apart from Russia, where, of course, the incumbent is able to win a miraculous victory in an entirely legitimate contest, I'm sure.
It is a tough time to be a politician, but I'm not sure there'll be much sympathy at home. But shall we see what the Labour Party make of all this? Let's speak to Khalid Mahmood, MP for Birmingham Perry Barr. Khalid, thank you very much for joining us. I must get you on what's coming out of the Labour Party today, or what's been reported about one of Labour's key policies. And this is, of course, the tax raid on private schools, adding VAT onto fees. We're reading a report out today saying that this may actually cost the taxpayer up to £1.6 billion, because lots of students will have to move into the state sector, and that will make state schools more crowded and everything else. Is this tax raid on private schools just politics of envy?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to see where the figures are coming from in terms of transferring to the public sector, in terms of what the students will do and the parents will do. I think, at the moment, we've calculated the figures. We're happy that the figures, the money that we get, will go in to our normal schools, our government schools, local authority schools, and will provide a better level of standard of education for all of the students that go to those schools.
We're hearing today that the numbers the Labour Party has rested on from the IFS were mainly based on a 2001 report about American Catholic schools. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence to be going on here. Is this something the Labour Party is going to stick with, despite this new report?
Well, look, I think the decision is made. We have looked at the figures. Rachel Reeves, before this was put out, Rachel Reeves has looked at the figures. And as far as that is concerned, we need to put reasonable resources into schools that majority of our pupils go to. And that's what this is about. And that's what this will happen. If people then transition back into the community schools that we have, then the issue is that they will also get better education as well.
Well, let's return to our top story, because looking at the political situation right now, looking at the local elections and then the general election, you might be fighting a different Prime Minister to the one that is currently in post. How does the Labour Party triangulate and prepare for an uncertain 6 months ahead?
Well, the Labour Party wants an election. We want an election as soon as possible. The first date available is the 2nd of May, and we're very happy to move forward with that. Rishi running around and trying to hide from the people is not going to help. It doesn't matter who comes forward. The people want to move forward. We've had a huge living crisis. We've got a huge issue with the international trade figures that we have. We're not growing fast enough. We're bumbling on the bottom line at the moment, and we want to get a government in which will make a difference, and that's to be the Labour Party.
And how are you going to grow the economy in ways that the government isn't? We've heard very mixed messages from Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, over the tax burden. She says it's too high, but then won't point to any tax cuts. She says public spending isn't high enough for certain public services, but can't point to raising public spending in any key areas. So at the moment, we've just got a promise from the Labour Party that the economy will do better, but no real evidence to show that it will.
Well, look, one of the key things that Rachel's looking at is to implement properly the windfall tax on the energy companies who've made an absolute fortune through this period. The issues around banks and what sort of money they've made, we need to look at that. And I think also what we need to do is look at other tax potentials
that's
that
all
have been cut
about
off.
taxing more. What about growing the economy?
But it's not taxing the local people. It's not taxing the people. It's taxing those huge corporations who've lived the back of the people, and that's why we have a cost of living crisis. So that's quite clear. It is taxing more, but people who need to be taxed properly.
How will a higher windfall tax on oil and gas,
which is already 75%,
lead to economic growth? How are those two together.
Because that is the money that you can invest back into the opportunities that we need to do. We'll need to look at housing, which is the Labour Party is committed on developing housing. Construction traditionally has been always the best thing to make the economy grow. The Labour Party is looking at that. We need to work with the private sector in terms of construction, and we'll hope to do that as well. So there's opportunities not just based on tax, but developing our base in terms of construction, in terms of industry. We have huge potential in defence. We've got a huge potential in terms of getting our industry off with the AUKUS deal with the Australians and the Americans. And we want a government that actually works with the people, get the working people back in and get people working, particularly in the manufacturing industry.
Although you've given fairly mixed messages on this £28 billion of spending you were going to do on energy infrastructure. Are you committed to the 28 billion or not? I'm not. It seems like it's sort of in this halfway house.
Well, at the moment, until we see the books and what damage the Conservative government has done to our fiscal policies, we can't make a proper decision at the moment. But in principle, when we start to move on manufacturing, green manufacturing is part of manufacturing. And so therefore what we have to do is get that proper manufacturing base back up and running. And therefore most of that will be covered by that.
I think the electorate would quite like you to make a decision before the election rather than after it. But I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there and get to a break. Thank you very much for joining us, Khalid Mahmood. Really, really appreciate it.
Yes, the MP for Birmingham, Perry Barr. But coming up, we're asking, is Margaret Thatcher, or was she, a villain? This comes as the V&A Museum faces rather a lot of backlash after listing the former Prime Minister alongside Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden. We'll be having that debate after the break.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how can, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:25. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, was Margaret Thatcher a villain? Well, a special exhibition at the V&A on British humour discussing Punch and Judy puppets said the following.
Over the years, the evil character in this seaside puppet show has shifted from the devil to unpopular public figures, including Adolf Hitler, Margaret Thatcher and Osama bin Laden, to offer contemporary villains.
How can they slot Margaret Thatcher in between Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden? But is it fair? Here's the question. Is it fair to compare the Iron Lady with the likes of Hitler and bin Laden?
Clearly exactly the same. Clearly exactly the same. Well, joining us now is the author and broadcaster Dr. Lisa Mackenzie, who says Thatcher was a menace. And we're also joined by the political commentator Russell Quirk, who says she was the best PM that saved Britain. Now, I suppose let's start with you, Lisa. A menace on the level of Hitler? I mean, really?
Not on the level of Hitler. She's on the sliding scale, though. I'd definitely put her on that sliding scale. I mean, if you come to where I live, which is in Nottinghamshire in the ex-coalfields, you would definitely not see her as anything else but a villain. The communities where I live, and where my family's lived for generations, were absolutely destroyed by the Thatcher government, and then the Thatcher ideology that came ever since. We're 40 years on since the miners' strike, and we've had no infrastructure, we've had nothing. And Mrs. Thatcher, what she did is she wanted to smash up the mining communities, she wanted to smash the working class, and she had no idea or care of what she was going to do next. She was definitely a villain and absolutely needs to be put in the same room as the rest of the villainous characters.
OK, well, Russell Quirk, let's go to you. Margaret Thatcher is on the same sliding scale as Adolf Hitler, and she decimated parts of the country.
How ludicrous and how outrageous. Margaret Thatcher was one of the two greatest prime ministers that this country's ever had. Let us just be clear, in contrast to what Lisa's just said, Margaret Thatcher didn't want to smash communities or to do any such thing to people living in Britain. What she wanted to do and did do, and it took proper, strong advocacy and leadership to do so, was to fix the broken Britain that she inherited from 10 years of a left-wing Labour government, the likes of Callaghan and Wilson. Famously, if you remember, Callaghan, even though there were mountains of rubbish piled up on the streets, we had sky-high inflation that's made our recent inflation here in Britain look pathetic by comparison. We had unemployment that was absolutely in the millions. Margaret Thatcher inherited that, despite the likes of Callaghan saying, do you remember crisis? What crisis? The Labour Party, of course, caused the trouble, as usual, and didn't even acknowledge it. So Thatcher came along and had to be robust. She had to show leadership, something that perhaps our current politicians might like to take note of. The unions, by the way, were the ones that had put Britain, along with their left-wing overseers in Westminster, in exactly the position that Thatcher then had to reverse. They were the ones that were arguing for 3-day weeks and huge wage rises and wanted to work to rule. So the mining industries, I'm afraid, in contrast to Lisa saying that it was Thatcher that came along and broke them, the mining industry was already broken. It was already on its knees. It had to be closed down because it was wholly and utterly uncompetitive.
Well, Lisa, what do you make of that?
Well, let's just start with society. There is no such thing as society. Remember that famous phrase? Mrs. Thatcher and her Thatcherism purposely wanted to break working class people. She wanted to break unions because she wanted to have people in this country working for as little as possible, while those at the top took the most profit. And your perspective on this is depending on where you are in the country. If you are a middle class man who's quite wealthy, I'm sure you did very well out of Mrs. Thatcher. I'm sure she was great for you. But if you are working class and your communities were one of those communities that absolutely got destroyed and is still destroyed today, then obviously you're going to have a very different view of that.
Russell,
my view is best based in absolutely reality where I live today.
Russell, that is a good point, isn't it? Depending on your background, where you grew up, your family history, people do take a very different view on Thatcher's legacy. That is true. That is very true.
Well, they do, but it's not a good point. Now, Thatcher, actually, when it comes to socialism, and what socialists believe in, of course, is the even redistribution of wealth, or some such nonsense, as if everybody is actually truly equal, which, of course, in many respects, they're not. But what Thatcher did, even though she was far from being a socialist, she actually empowered this country more than probably any other political leader that we've ever had. You know, she gave us the ability to buy our own home at a discount. And in fact, the likes of Angela Rayner, of course, recently it's come to light, has even taken advantage of such a policy. So that created wealth. Big bang in the city, where we were able to invest in utility businesses that then also meant that our pensions and our investments were buoyed. You know, she did many things for entrepreneurs. She cut taxes significantly. Don't forget, the Labour government of the 70s wanted to tax hard-working industrialists and entrepreneurs and celebrities, people that actually created wealth in this country that trickled down to everybody through employment, tax, VAT, and so on. That was at 90% under Callaghan and the like. Mrs. Thatcher and her then Chancellor Nigel Dawson slashed taxes, increased wealth, and enabled everybody in Britain to be much, much better off than they would have been if we continued.
Russell, we're just running out of time. So, Lisa, last word to you. Last word.
Yeah, do you know, Russell, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Water company absolutely making profits out of not doing the job they were supposed to do. Council housing sold off, and now we've got nowhere to live, and rents are sky high. We've got a serious housing crisis. You have dug a hole. You've handed me an argument there. Thank you. What we are reaping today is what Thatcher sown.
Well, there we go. Thank you. Two very different views. Thank you very much, Russell Quirk and, of course, Lisa Mackenzie. That brilliant debate. Thank you very much. We're going to get to some of your views because they're coming in thick and fast. We'll get to them very, very shortly. But first, it's your news headlines.
It's 1:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. The Prime Minister says his focus is on the future of the country.
Interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
In Coventry, the Prime Minister also announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The 5-times gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer, but the 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2733 and €1.1692. The price of gold is £1,695.30 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,745 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweeping and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild, but it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius, further south mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, before the break, we debated whether it's fair to say Margaret Thatcher is a villain, is and was a villain on a sliding scale, one of our guests said, with Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden, which is quite the view. Duncan says, I'm working class, very working class, but I say we need another Maggie to sort this country out. We wouldn't have the problems we now have, he says.
And Paul has written in to say Margaret Thatcher saved the UK from a destroyed economy and infrastructure. It was Labour who closed more of our pits, closed more than double than Margaret Thatcher. Everyone forgets that. And Paul raises a very important point here, although I think the way that we phrase it, it's almost as if Margaret Thatcher said, I want to close this pit. No, she just stopped subsidising economically unproductive pits. You can't have a growing economy if you're literally funneling taxpayers' money to things that are not making any money at all. She transitioned the economy. Could you imagine if we were still sending people down pits today? You couldn't possibly imagine it. We went from a poor country to a rich country.
Well, Karen says she was a strong woman who took control of a situation where the trade unions were pursuing a ruinous hard left agenda and the UK was the sick man of Europe. She didn't shy away from making tough decisions. She was ahead of her time regarding green issues too. But Leslie says she was a one-trick pony, selling £60 billion of state assets at knockdown prices, he says.
Goodness me. But Sandra says, working class Welsh woman here. And the lady talking about Mrs Thatcher doesn't know what she's talking about. I lived through the Thatcher years and she gave the working class far more opportunity than socialist governments ever have done.
Well, please do keep your views coming in. This is a good one. gbviews@gbnews.com. What is Margaret Thatcher's legacy? And is she a villain on a par with Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden. The mind boggles.
Goodness me. I can just imagine the person who worked at the V&A Museum who wrote that display, sort of having a little smirk on their face as they did it, you know. I mean, technically it's true, some Punch and Judy shows have had Mrs Thatcher as a villain, but writing the sentence, oh, how are we going to make this funny? How are we going to make this sit in line with my predisposed political opinions? I know. Osama bin Laden, Margaret Thatcher, Adolf Hitler. A funny list. I mean, we see what you're doing, V&A Museum, we see it.
We see it. Well, in other news, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has set out plans to support female entrepreneurs, cut red tape for businesses and boost apprenticeships.
Speaking at an event in the Midlands, Rishi Sunak has pledged to create up to 20,000 more apprenticeships, saying that the government will pay the full cost of these apprenticeships for people aged 21 or under, but at small firms, and that's starting in April.
So, joining us now is GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan with On the Money. Right, Liam, what's your assessment of this announcement then? Is this a good thing? It's going to get lots of young people new jobs?
Good to be with you guys. It's a real perennial of election campaigning or pre-election campaigning before the campaign starts in earnest for governments to talk about small businesses. Why is that? It's because small businesses are such an important part of our economy. Let's have a look at some numbers here, because it wouldn't be On the Money without some numbers, would it? There are 5.5 million small firms, small and medium-sized firms in this country. That's up to about 50 or 75 employees. And Rishi Sunak's just announced £60 million for 20,000 more apprenticeships. Not a huge amount of money. That's £3,000 per apprenticeship. If an apprentice earns £1,000 a month, that's 3 months. That's not very much. Slash regulation for SMEs. It's being billed as a Brexit bonus. And take it from me, as somebody who comes from a small business background, it's regulation that really irks people that run small businesses, often family-run businesses. Endless calls for information from the taxman and all the rest of it. And also, Rishi Sunak announced a new task force for SMEs, for female founders. Guys, I know you know this, you're steeped in politics, but I can't stress enough how important small businesses are to our economy. As I said, there are around 5.5 million of them. They account for 50% of our national income. That is 50% of all the goods and services that we provide. And they employ 2/3 of us. 2/3 of people in work for a small or medium-sized enterprise. Rishi Sunak knows this. Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch knows this. That's why they went to Coventry today to this Business Connect event, trying to really reach out to the manufacturing heartland of the UK. In fairness to the Prime Minister, this is the third such Business Connect event that he has held since he became Prime Minister in the autumn of 2022, not so long ago. But they know, in Downing Street, they know that small business owners, people that often work for small businesses, they're pragmatic swing voters. They're not really tribal voters. They vote in a way, however they need to vote, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, whatever it is, Reform, we must say now, SDP, Greens, however they vote, it's because they think it's going to be the best thing for their livelihoods and the best thing for their business. And the Prime Minister very much tried to tap into that today. And I think we've got a little clip here of what he said to these business leaders in Coventry.
Liam, we don't have that clip. We'll see if we can bring it a little bit later.
It was going so well.
I love the new graphic, by the way, Liam. Getting able to see you with the numbers next to it. It's a marked improvement.
Tom, I know you and Emily and indeed all the GB News viewers. And how would they feel if they couldn't see my little fizzog? I mean, you know, there are support groups out there. There are therapy sessions online. Oh, we need to see Liam's face. No, I think, look, it just shows that GB News is evolving. But
Liam, on the female entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a female, I may choose to start a business. It is true that in terms of getting investment, they are very far behind the men.
They are, Emily, and I must say, I'm glad you asked me that, because certainly in my experience, some of the most impressive small businesses that I've come across have been started by female entrepreneurs. You know, not just in the sort of cliched areas like health and beauty and lifestyle, not at all. I've met many small business owners, female small business owners, and they tend to be really rooted in their communities. And female small business founders, they tend to They tend to found small businesses out of frustration, not just out of frustration because they may feel they're not always getting a fair crack of the whip at big companies and they want more flexible working. They tend to found small businesses based on their own experience. They may have, their experience in their communities, bringing up children, maybe with, interacting with other local businesses, retail. They tend to found businesses that solve a problem that they have encountered in their own lives, and that's a really good way to start a business. And some people could, I'm going to not give Rishi Sunak a hard time on this. I know he's had a hard time for a long time on many things over recent months, but I know for a fact, talking to him over the years, that he is really he does really want to help small businesses. He does know, he comes from a small business background himself, of course, a pharmaceutical business. He is from a family, one of the long line and honourable tradition of Asian families coming to the UK and founding small businesses. It's what immigrants often do. I'm from an Irish background, as you know. All my relatives, they all founded small businesses. Maybe they were all just a bit too awkward to want to work for other people, but they wanted to build wealth for themselves and their families. We are good at small businesses in the UK. We are good at entrepreneurialism. What we're not very good at is those small businesses growing, getting the finance to become bigger businesses that employ more people and become more valuable. I'd have preferred to hear more from Rishi Sunak today. How do we find the finance? How do we encourage banks and other investors to really back the best of British small businesses in order that they become big businesses? Because that's how you boost productivity, that's how you boost growth, that's how you boost wealth that pays for all the public finance, all public services and everything else in the economy.
Well, it was Napoleon who called us a nation of shopkeepers. He meant it as an insult, but I think probably the biggest badge of honour he could have possibly said. Liam Halligan, thanks for joining us.
I admire anyone who starts a business. It takes a lot of gumption, doesn't it?
And actually, Rishi Sunak's mum, female founder.
Well, there you go. Speaks from the heart.
There
you know, we'll be nice to Rishi on that one. Coming up, Princess Kate has been spotted shopping, so say rumours, but we haven't seen any photos yet. But could this mark the end of endless weeks of health speculation?
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 2, and Princess Catherine's sightings are amongst the headlines again today. Yes.
News has spread that the Princess of Wales has been spotted out and about on a weekend visit to a farm shop with Prince William and the children. But where are the photos, Tom?
Yeah,
where are the photos?
This is the real clincher. In the articles that mentioned it, you've seen Kate. There's a picture of her there. Turns out that there aren't any photographs of this supposed spotting. But amid all the speculation and rumours after that photoshopped photograph, is it possible that this could put an end to all these wild speculations?
Well, here's hoping. Joining us now to discuss this is royal commentator Caroline Aston. Caroline, thank you very much indeed. Yes, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the tabloids, all talking about this spotting of Princess Catherine in this Windsor farm shop. We don't have any evidence, but from your experience, are these types of reports true?
Well, we've spotted the Princess of Wales rather as though she was a rare bird or butterfly. And as the buds of spring burst, she's broken cover, so it would appear. But I think there was a fairly tacit agreement that there wouldn't be any photographs taken of her until she revealed herself back on official duty. But my goodness me, what a rough old ride it's been, hasn't it, for the Princess of Wales? All sorts of conspiracy theories have been out there in the absence of hard information, and some of them beggar belief, going from reports of, well, rather exotic buttock-based surgery, breast implants, cyborgs of her, in a coma, all sorts of things. And I think the point remembering here is that the one thing perhaps that our late great sovereign lady Queen Elizabeth II never really had to face to the extent that the new modern face of the royal family does was the amount of stuff out there on social media. We're all so aware of what we're all doing. We live, don't we, in an age of self-revelation. We put out there our surgeries, our love affairs, our lives, our food, and we don't quite get it when the royal family, who we see as public property, maybe don't reciprocate, don't bear all. Normally, never complain, never explain, but my goodness, we complained loudly just lately, and they've had to explain, or at least Kate has. Interesting times for her, and come on, everybody. Recovering from a serious operation, well, that's hard indeed, isn't it? And it's a mental fight as well. So goodness knows how the poor woman has felt with this constant debate and analysis of what to me appears to be cack-handed photoshopping.
Yeah, Caroline, it's a really, really good and interesting point that this vacuum has been filled with sort of online speculation, half of it joking, half of it somewhat serious, and a lot of it sort of halfway between the two of them. I suppose if you're recovering from an operation, she might just not want to be seen by anyone. She
might not just want to be seen,
not be looking her best at the moment.
That's always a possibility. Caroline, we're going to have to wrap it up there, but really appreciate your time on this. Caroline Aston, their royal commentator. But this is something that's popped up while we've been on air.
Yes, a tree mural in Finsbury Park that appeared on a residential building overnight is the work of Banksy, according to the anonymous street artist himself. He claimed that graffiti... Oh, there's a picture of Jeremy Corbyn here.
That's not Banksy.
The story here is that Jeremy Corbyn thinks that this is a wonderful artwork, proving there is hope for our natural world everywhere.
May I just explain what it looks like for our radio listeners? So it looks like a wall of a block of flats, and in front of it is a tree with no leaves. So Banksy has splattered the wall behind the tree in green paint. No leaves have been drawn. I guess it's an artistic interpretation of what a tree might look like.
Splatter on a flat surface, and Jeremy Corbyn has said, what a wonderful artwork.
He's delighted. It's in his constituency.
Splatter of paint. I mean, this is not a great. This isn't the Mona Lisa, Jeremy. There isn't a great deal of work that's got it. Someone's just splattered some paint at a wall.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn's very proud of it. I personally would not like that to be on the side of my building. But let us know what you think of that Banksy. But coming up, the Prime Minister pulls no punches in his fight for his political life. We'll bring you the very latest, so stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweeping, and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild. But it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius. Further south, mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 18th of March.
Rishi Sunak fights for his political life with a speech insisting this will be the year Britain bounces back. But with sharks circling, calling for his head, could Penny Mordaunt swap the sword for the crown?
Rwanda deportation flights could get the green light this week, but MPs set to vote on that flagship policy at 6 p.m. today. But the Rwanda government is reported to want to slow down the resettlement scheme. Should Kigali be calling the shots?
And there are reports that the Princess of Wales has been seen out and about shopping. It comes as speculation continues to grow over the state of her health. Will they issue any more photos?
This is the problem with that photograph. This is the problem. They issued it in the first place. Initially, they said, Kate's going to be out of action until after Easter.
Yeah.
We should expect her at Easter. But then there was all of this speculation, and I think a lot of the speculation was just people having a joke, having a laugh online, not seriously believing any of the wild conspiracy theories that have been thought up. But then Kensington Palace felt under such pressure because of the fevered speculation online that they issued a photo. But they issued a photo, and she wanted it to be photoshopped because she's just had a large operation.
Well,
she's not going to be looking her best. She's not going to be feeling her best. Of course she's going to want to sort of perhaps touch it up a bit.
Well, I saw Princess Catherine down Waitrose yesterday, actually.
Did you?
And then someone told me that she took a quick trip to Aldi.
Oh, yeah?
And then to the farm shop down the road, so there you go.
A big shop.
And this is the problem.
But you don't need a
Because
proof.
the tabloids are running with sources say that she was seen at this shop in Windsor, this farm shop. She may well have been seen there, but there isn't any evidence, so it won't stop the speculation over where she is and where she isn't. And, you know, unless someone comes, you know, posts a picture of her at this farm shop, we don't know. So it's just endless speculation. Perhaps you think we should stop talking about it altogether. But, of course, this is a woman who will be queen. And I do think it is understandable why people are so concerned. That does not excuse the amount of conspiracies that are going around, and some of them are just cruel and unkind. But it's hardly surprising considering her position.
I mean, maybe there was a halfway house here. There's been no speculation that the king hasn't been seen for however long and whatever, because he's told us exactly his problem. He says he's been diagnosed with cancer, and we know that. The problem is abdominal surgery is such a vague thing. It's sort of this halfway house between saying what's going on and not saying what's going on. And perhaps that vacuum has created the speculation. If she'd have just said what operation she had and then said, I'm not going to be seen until after Easter, perhaps there wouldn't have been this fraud.
Well, it's that question, does she deserve to have a private life? Does she have that right? Miss your headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested the right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. The Prime Minister says his focus is on the future of the country.
I'm not interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
In Coventry, the Prime Minister announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. Labour's accused the government of economic failure, but Mr Sunak says action is being taken and the full cost of apprenticeships will be paid for people aged under 21 at small firms from the 1st of April. Small business owners have welcomed the move.
I think the apprenticeship payment in full would be fantastic. We've had an apprentice before. She did phenomenally well, but funds have been quite tight the last couple of years, and that's not something that I've been able to enter into again, although I want to. So that is a benefit.
I think there's lots of positives in there. I think there's some great stuff for helping small businesses. For our business, we need a bit more.
To the small businesses in the UK will see it as to what it is. It's probably a last-ditch effort to get some confidence back. I don't think he's done enough. I don't think it's going to give the confidence to small businesses.
In other news, the Foreign Secretary has criticised the Russian election results, saying it wasn't free and fair. Early results showed President Vladimir Putin won nearly 88% of the vote, giving him a 5th term in office. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he's behaving like a modern-day Stalin, and he accused Putin of stealing the election after having opponents imprisoned or murdered. Thousands of people turned up at polling stations in Russia and cities across the world to protest the result. The Kremlin responded by promising to imprison anyone taking part for up to 5 years. Former Kremlin advisor and Russian exile Valery Morozov says that there is no viable opposition to Putin.
The problem is that Putin is still keeping Russia moving, developing, or in any case. Well, there is no alternative. There is no people who have ideas, other ideas. You have Putin. Russia is now, if you compare the development of Russia, for example, from January 2023 to this January, it is 4.6% development.
Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The athlete posted the news on Instagram, saying it was time to move on. The 5-times gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer, but the 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. We could see flying taxis take to the skies in 2 years under the government's new drones plan. The Department for Transport is proposing flying taxis without pilots on board by 2030 as part of its Future of Flight Action Plan. It says the plan would mean the adoption of technology that was once confined to the realms of science fiction. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 2, and Number 10 says that the government has started to identify illegal migrants who will be on the first flights to Rwanda. They're saying that as the Prime Minister today sought to change the narrative by pledging to create 20,000 more apprenticeships. Although I'm not sure 20,000 more apprenticeships is really the deal breaker to get the Tories up from their languishing position in the...
Although Liam Halligan was at pains to say that Rishi Sunak does genuinely care about apprenticeships and small businesses and all that good stuff, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice thing, but, like, the government can do lots of little nice things. Fundamentally, this isn't his big sort of relaunch, refresh that perhaps this enormous speech in Coventry was trailed as by some.
But it's very curious that the government, the Home Office, are already contacting or identifying potential illegal migrants who may be deported to Rwanda. Is it a bit soon? Is it a bit soon before all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted?
Well, they're voting on it at 6 p.m. today in the Commons, but meanwhile, there are sharks circling around the Prime Minister. Rumours continue to grow that rebel Conservative MPs will attempt to oust him before the next election, perhaps after the local elections. Penny Mordaunt is said to be their preferred candidate.
Yes, what do you make of that? Let us know. Penny Mordaunt for Prime Minister. Throw another one into the ring.
Let's speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, about all of the above. And Christopher, I suppose the big new piece of news today is this rounding up of illegal migrants.
Yeah, not rounding up. That sounds a bit ominous, I think, Tom. A writing of letters to a cohort of people who could be on the first flights out. The government clearly wants to get momentum behind what they intend to do. Now, the votes to overturn 10 changes to the Rwanda bill pushed through by unelected peers start today, probably at 6 p.m, not 8 p.m, as we thought earlier. 2.5 hours of voting. That will carry on today, and then they'll come back to the Lords probably on Wednesday. The Lords might then vote to reinstate those 10 changes. It goes back to the Commons, and very, very quickly. And the process called ping pong, as like a ping pong ball, this bill goes between the different Houses of Commons, House of Parliament. That could mean that it could be law by the end of the week. It speeds up as it goes on until it looks like the Lords will not accept the government's demands, and we could even then have a long delay. But it's likely to go through very shortly. The number 10s tell us today they are still banking on a spring deadline for the first flight taking off, because even if it becomes law, any of those getting letters in that cohort will probably try and appeal, and then you might have a short courts process before it can happen. So the government's trying to say to Tory MPs, look what we're up to, look at the knitting, forget all the noises off, forget what all the rebels are saying, look what we're up to. The problem is that the rebels are talking very loudly to people like me in Parliament, and not the usual ones either. Two sources told me as many as 40 letters have been submitted to Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 Committee of Tory MPs. More than 53. There's a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister as leader of the Tory party. There's a feeling of jeopardy right now, I'm afraid, and that's because this party knows they can replace a failing leader if they want to, and it seems some of them are tempted to do so all over again.
Christopher, in terms of identifying migrants for the Rwanda deportation scheme, presumably that's anybody who's crossed the channel by irregular means. That's according to the law, or so I thought, so it can't be that difficult to identify. But then, of course, on the other hand, we found out that the government doesn't know where tens of thousands of migrants are in the country, so that may prove difficult when it comes to identifying. What do we know about what this identifying actually means? You say a letter may be written to them, an email, a phone call?
Well, there are enough of them, aren't there, in hotel rooms across the country, also in some army bases, and that's how they can be got hold of. I mean, the numbers you're describing, Emily, of course, there are a lot more than those held in these camps or in hotels. But those are the ones, they're starting small. The Rwanda government's very, very clear. They want to start with a few hundred maybe, and then grow towards maybe the thousands. But today we've heard from Rishi Sunak. He's made very clear that the May deadline is still standing. He also had things to say about his own leadership. Let's hear what he had to say.
Conservatives are united in wanting to deliver a brighter future for our country, and that's why we're cutting people's taxes, £900 for a typical person in work. We're increasing the state pension by £900 in just a few weeks. We're in the middle of one of the biggest expansions of free childcare that our country's seen. We're getting the number of boats down by a third last year, tackling illegal migration, and today announcing new numbers of apprenticeships, supporting small businesses. These are all the things that matter to people, and we are absolutely united in delivering for the country on these important matters.
When it comes to election funding, why would you take £5 million from someone who you've said made racist comments?
He's already apologised for these comments, and my point of view is when someone apologises genuinely, expresses remorse, that should be accepted, and that's that.
When is the earliest that those planes will take off to take asylum seekers to Rwanda?
Yeah, I'm still committed to the timeline that I set out previously, which was we aim to get a flight off in the spring. It's important that we get the Rwanda scheme up and running because we need to have a deterrent. We need to make it clear that if you come here illegally, you won't be able to stay and we will be able to remove you. That is the only way to properly solve the issue of illegal migration. Now, we've made good progress. Boat numbers were down by a third last year, so that shows that our plan is working. But in order to finish the job, we need the Rwanda scheme through. We're getting it through Parliament. Everyone is trying to block us, including the Labour Party, because they don't have a plan to tackle this problem. We do. I'm determined to see it through, get the deterrent up and running as quickly as possible.
July or autumn for a general election?
No, I spoke about this last week and many times before, but what matters is the choice at that election, the substance. And as we've seen over the past few weeks, and we'll continue to see this week, our plan is working. Taxes are being cut by £900 for a typical person in work, the state pension going up by £900, the number of boat crossings down by a third, waiting lists starting to come down. Those are the things that we're focused on, and if we stick with that plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's the choice at the election, and that's what we'll deliver.
There's the PM there saying, stick with our plan. He clearly thinks, doesn't he, that time will help him. He's playing long, maybe for a November general election. People like Ben Wallace, of course, former Defence Secretary, leaving Parliament at the election, he's saying the time for a challenge against him has gone, the time to replace him as leader has gone. And that's certainly the message from number 10, analyser Rishi Sunak. Your moment's gone. Just get on with it and back our guy. But the problem that the rebels say to him is that nothing has worked. You've had all these speeches at the budget, the autumn statement, the conference speech. Nothing has worked. So why should we try a new candidate, maybe Penny Mordaunt?
Yes, Chris, the phrase that Ben Wallace used was Tories must march towards the guns, which sounds a bit
dramatic.
Dramatic. It just reminded me of the charge of the Light Brigade. Then into the Valley of Death rode the 600, perhaps marched the 348, the number of Tory MPs. Although when I wrote that and put that on Twitter, a senior Conservative MP messaged to me saying that the rate of attrition at the charge of the Light Brigade was 40% who died or were casualties. And currently polling looks like an attrition rate of 60% for Tory MPs, so it would be worse than the charge of the Light Brigade.
Yes, it probably would be, I think, worse than the charge of the Light Brigade. I think the problem they've got right now is rather than going to the Valley of Death, they've got a chance of trying to save the day. I mean, I guess there's little choice when they went into that Valley of Death with the charge of the Light Brigade. If you got an option to try and go a different route, not into the valley, why not take it? And then this party has proven it can change leaders and do it quickly if they think someone isn't working. In the village, they think, the Westminster village, they think Penny Mordaunt cuts through, she scares Labour. I think that she wouldn't win a vote amongst the base because of her views on woke, in quotes, issues. And it might be that if she can turn the polls round, the supporters, the membership, might come round to her way of thinking. I should say, though, that she is not supporting all this attempt at unseating or removing Rishi Sunak as leader. She's been very, very quiet. There's a word is she might try and say something at this Thursday's Leaders' Questions, but until that point, we're going to hear from the PM addressing Tory backbenchers at the 1922 Committee on Wednesday. So we've got a long week to play out this week, Tom and Emily.
Yes, I reckon most of them will probably bide their time till after the election, but we shall see. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope, our political editor. The military language, don't know how I feel about that.
Oh, military is always, it's a campaign. It's an election campaign. Of course it's military language.
Yeah, well, we can now return to Coventry because GB News presenter Pip Thompson is getting some reaction from small businesses to the Prime Minister's speech. Pip, who have you been talking to?
Here today because of my TikTok journey.
Hi Emily. Well, I'm actually at a Federation of Small Businesses business boot camp. There's about 200 people here at this networking event. Lots of interesting speeches going on. I'm keeping my voice a little low because I don't want to upstage the speaker currently, but I have managed to tempt three ladies away to talk to them about what the Prime Minister had to say this morning. It was all about cutting red tape, wasn't it? Cutting taxes, creating thousands more apprenticeships, and also he's saying all the right things, saying that the government's doing everything it can to turbocharge small businesses. They are the engines of economic growth. So Lily, hi, you're a nutrition consultant. You've got your own business.
Yeah.
Was there anything you heard that satisfied you today from the Prime Minister?
Not necessarily, to be honest, especially when on the issue of apprentice. I'm one-woman band at the moment. I'm a small business, but I'd rather he support us as businesses and like funding towards businesses than giving than the apprentice, because I would love to grow my business and employ more people who are already experienced, people who know their job, instead of me spending the time having to support apprentices, because as a small business it's just not practical at all.
Okay, Anne, you're an accounting practitioner. Just tell me what that means in layman's terms, and was it helpful?
In layman's terms, I help 350 clients and small businesses myself. The apprenticeship route for most small businesses isn't that helpful because they haven't got enough normal staff to be able to support an apprentice properly. The other measures, things like VAT and things like that, again, that's not enough as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing to help small businesses, as in employers like myself.
So what did you want to hear? What's missing? And obviously, he wants your vote, doesn't he? He thinks the Conservative Party is the party to improve the economy.
A lot of small businesses, their growth is stunted by the current VAT regime being at 85,000 to register, and with it only increasing to 90, that's not going to make any difference. We felt it needed to go well over 100,000 in turnover, and things like people who've got premises, the business rates needed to be addressed. So, they were two key areas, and perhaps giving a higher employment allowance for small businesses to help them with national insurance contributions. So,
Lily, are you influenced today from what you've heard when it comes to the election?
At the moment, I'm undecided, to be honest, because I still feel that there's more to be done to us as business owners. So I haven't really decided whether I will vote or not, sadly.
You don't know whether you'll vote or not?
Yeah.
Excuse me, we're getting knocked out by balloons here. Let's just move those out of the way. You don't know whether you're going to vote or not, really?
Yeah, I'm undecided, to be honest. Yeah.
And yet here's the government saying that businesses like yours, you're the engines of the economy.
Well,
they want to turbocharge you. You're not seduced by any of that?
No. I mean, it's good and well and good they can say it, but we want to see evidence. Like, what do you mean by turbocharge? How are you even supporting us? We are the backbone of the economy, but we don't get the recognition and the support that we need as small businesses.
Okay, well, talking of support, let me just bring in Angela. So your company, you're a marketing officer, and you've got a company that supports businesses with loans.
So the company that I work for supports small businesses through business support and business loans. We're an alternative lender, and I'm interested to see more support from government when it comes to not just equity investment, but more debt investment. And I know they mentioned investing in women task force, and it sounds brilliant. But at the same time, that's equity investment. How accessible is that for smaller businesses? Where is the debt investment? Where is the support for training when it comes to financial management? We would like to see that. And our clients are looking for that. We've seen a massive requirement for that kind of support.
Okay, well, it was a 7-minute speech from Rishi Sunak, but certainly here at this event, this Federation of Small Businesses event, it does seem to be quite a lukewarm response to what the Prime Minister had to say.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much, Pip Thompson there at talking to small businesses in reaction to the Prime Minister's speech.
3 female founders there.
Yes.
Very good. Clearly women are doing very well in the business of small businesses. Good stuff.
Yes, although apparently not getting as much investment into the small businesses. Lots of those that's the
Now,
key.
guess what? Sadiq Khan, London Mayor, of course, has an absolutely huge number of jobs in City Hall that are paid over £100,000. You won't believe just how many jobs there are at City Hall paid for by the taxpayer that are six figures and over. I wonder how many are in PR.
Well, we'll keep that number to ourselves.
Yeah.
So you'll have to join us after the break to find out what it is.
Mark Dolan tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
I've personally been very torn on whether Prince Harry should have full police protection when he's in the United Kingdom. On the one hand, why should taxpayers fork out for somebody that's left the country and the institution? He is no longer a working, serving royal. But I don't think it matters. He is one of the most famous men in the world, and whether he's a royal or not, he is an ambassador for this country. And he still does good. Charitable causes, the Invictus Games, and he is still a nice and charming guy with a heart. And whilst he has left the royal family and departed these shores, he was and remains the son of King Charles. That is a biological fact. Well, let's hope so. And it wasn't his choice to be born into royalty. It wasn't his choice to be the son of the king. And for that reason, I think he should have equal police protection to his brother William when he is in this country. He couldn't be a more high-profile figure, and unfortunately, like all the royals, Harry will be a target for some very bad people. I fear that if, God forbid, anything happened to him or his family, the authorities would have blood on their hands. So, it's not often that I back Prince Harry, but on this one, he has my support. Look what happened to his poor mum, killed in a Paris tunnel in the 1990s with an allegedly drunk chauffeur. A top royal security insider recently told me that Diana would still be with us today if she had had top royal protection at that time. So let's not make the same mistake twice. Prince Harry needs full protection and the best we've got. Yes, he might be a numpty, but he's our numpty.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, we promised to tell you the number of jobs that City Hall and its subsidiaries have at over £100,000, the number of six-figure salaries that the Mayor of London is responsible for that come out of taxpayers' cash. What's the number, Emily?
It's 1,146 people. So 1,146 people take home six-figure salaries. And that's last year. Now Sadiq Khan has been accused of turning his office into, quotes, a gravy train.
So these are over 1,100 jobs that the Mayor is responsible for that pay over £100,000 a year.
Now, some of these are in the Met, some of these are in TfL, but what is striking is that the number of City Hall and Transport for London officials that are receiving more than £100,000 a year has almost doubled under Sadiq Khan. Is this just inflation at play? Or is this the recruitment of more and more people paid for by the taxpayer with less than an interest in necessarily bringing those costs under control.
Well, of course, it was the mayor's night czar. Have you heard of this? He's got
she'll be in this.
czar for the nighttime economy. She was originally hired, I think it was on 40,000, and now takes home over 100,000.
Yeah.
Her job has, she only does a few days a week, and her job has spiralled in costs. Meanwhile, do you know how many nightclubs in London have closed? Do you know how many pubs don't open after 10 or 11 p.m? But there is no nighttime economy in London.
I'm tucked up in bed by 10 o'clock, tell me.
I wish I wasn't. I wish I could stroll through the streets and pubs could sort of have a licence that went on later. But I mean, Sadiq Khan spoke... was it last week or the week before about sort of being delighted that he leads a 24-hour city, which, compared to any other large city around the world, any other city of 10 million people, London doesn't have a nighttime economy.
No. Well, we'll return to this because it is quite amazing that many jobs are being paid over six figures. But Christopher Hope revealed earlier in the hour that the government has started now to identify the illegal migrants who will be on the first flights to Rwanda.
Yes, MPs will today debate recommendations or amendments made by the House of Lords, which require the government to prove that Rwanda is safe in multiple different ways before those flights are allowed.
Yes, and this comes as analysis reveals the true costs of the scheme, expected to hit billions, with one deportation now estimated to be £230,000. Shall we speak to James Hill, who's the political correspondent for The Spectator? James, so the government are kicking themselves into action, identifying illegal migrants that may be on these first flights. Are they putting the cart before the horses?
Well, I think it's about the necessary planning, really, involved with all of this. Because at the moment, Rishi Sunak wants to have a Rwanda scheme that's going to be up and serving as a deterrent. So there may be a couple of hundreds or so which are involved with this, about 350 or so, as we say from reports today. But obviously, you've got a backlog of around 55,000 or so who've arrived over the past couple of years. So really, it's more about a deterrent to try and stop small boats crossing. And the question is, how effective a deterrent will that be, depending on how many we get off the ground?
And what is the process to happen now? Clearly, the House of Commons is... Well, I say clearly, perhaps they won't, but they want to strip away the amendments that the House of Lords made. What's going to happen tonight?
Well, what we expect to see this week is the classic parliamentary game of ping-pong. Talking to MPs today, it seems that there isn't much of a sort of struggle that we saw around the sort of second reading back in December when we saw the One Nation group and Bill Cash's group all sort of making lots of noise about different amendments. We've got these 10 amendments which have been put forward by the House of Lords. I think the Conservative MPs can be expected to defeat all of those because we have this sort of Schrodinger's majority in the House of Commons right now, which is, obviously at the polls, Rishi Sunak's very far behind, but on paper he still has a majority. That should enable them to ensure that all those amendments are rejected. It then goes back to the House of Lords on Wednesday. All Tory peers, I understand, have been told to turn up for that vote. And then it's about trying to make sure that bill passes into law before next Tuesday when Parliament rises for recess. If the Lords still are opposing the bill on Wednesday, what will happen is rather than those 10 amendments, you might get 5 or 6 as sort of opposition is weakened. But it really does depend on the strength of opposition, particularly among crossbench peers who will be the sort of crucial bellwether in the upper house. And I think this is all really important, Tom, because Rishi Sunak has pledged repeatedly he wants to see flights off the ground by the spring. And of course, if he delays it until after Parliament goes into recess, then we're talking about mid-June rather than May as he hoped.
And the likes of Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman have pointed out that individuals will still have the right to appeal their deportation to Rwanda. The courts are very much still going to be involved.
Well, yes, but I think that this was about a balancing act. This was as much about politics as it was law. And I think really the sort of bare safeguards here was what was needed to keep some of the One Nation lot on side. And also, do you remember these arguments were the ones made to peers in the upper house this week saying, look, there are some legal safeguards and that's why you should allow this bill through. And I think it's now more about trying to appease those kind of liberal-minded peers in the House of Lords rather than necessarily talking about the concerns of people like Robert Jenrick, given we've already had the second and third reading of the Safety of Rwanda bill in the House of Commons in previous months. So now it's about the future rather than the past.
So crucial votes tonight. Tonight at 6 p.m, MPs will start voting on this, probably rip out those Lords amendments. Wednesday, the Lords might put some of them back in. It's going to go to and fro, but it's likely it will get passed. Well, James Heal, thank you so much for talking us through what exactly is going on today. Sometimes these parliamentary procedures can be slightly mystifying.
Perplexing. But coming up, we're going to be speaking to Miriam Cates MP as Rishi Sunak continues to fight for his political life. She's also got something else very interesting to talk to us about. We'll reveal all after your headlines.
It's 2:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. The government has started to identify which illegal migrants will be on the first flight to Rwanda. Downing Street says the initial cohort of people is now being contacted, with the Prime Minister still determined to see the first plane departing later this spring. MPs are due to vote this evening on 10 changes to the Rwanda bill made by peers in the House of Lords. The Prime Minister has rebuffed speculation about a leadership challenge, saying he's not interested in Westminster politics. Speaking at a business event in Warwickshire, Rishi Sunak urged his party to stick to the plan and told backbenchers that the economy is turning a corner. He was forced to speak out after rumours suggested right-wing Tories were lining up Penny Mordaunt to replace him. In Coventry, the Prime Minister also announced plans to create 20,000 new apprenticeships. Rishi Sunak pledged £60 million of new investment to cover a series of reforms, including fully funding training for young people and cutting red tape for small businesses. And Britain's most successful female Olympian, Dame Laura Kenny, has announced her retirement from professional cycling. The five-time gold medalist had been expected to compete at the Paris Games this summer. The 31-year-old welcomed her second son last year and said spending time at home with her family was proving more important to her. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweep in and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild, but it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius, further south mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
It's 2:37. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, women are being exploited by large corporations which offer incentives to freeze their eggs. So says Conservative MP Miriam Cates.
Yes, women do have more than one egg.
Hopefully, yes.
But the MP for Penistone and Stockbridge and mother of three has highlighted that concerns that women are being falsely reassured by schemes like this, saying, quote, only a tiny percentage of people who freeze their eggs will ever become pregnant.
Well, Miriam Cates joins us now. Miriam, thank you very much for joining us to discuss this important issue. I mean, as a woman myself, I've spoken to friends about this issue, people who perhaps don't have a partner yet or are very busy with their career, thinking about whether they should make this decision to freeze their eggs. And you're sending out a bit of a warning here.
Yes, that's right. So we know from polling that the vast majority of young women do want to become mothers, about 92%, but that increasingly women are delaying having children. The average age of becoming a mother for the first time is getting later and later every year. And of course, there are all sorts of reasons for that, some of which you've just mentioned, finance, career, all those things, not finding the right partner. But what I'm concerned about is that fertility companies and increasingly employers are saying to women, you know, freeze your eggs, that's your insurance policy, don't worry if you're not ready or able to have children right now. If you freeze your eggs, you'll secure your chance of becoming a mother. And unfortunately, it's just not that simple, because the process of freezing eggs doesn't necessarily always work. Around 80 to 90% of them, those eggs are thawed successfully, which sounds like quite a high success rate. But then when you go through all the other steps of fertilization, implanting the embryo, the same steps you would with IVF, very, very few of those eggs end up as a live birth. Even if you do go through the process of thawing your eggs, it looks like only around 19% of those eggs will actually result in you becoming a mother. Now, you wouldn't buy an insurance policy, a car insurance policy, that only had a 19% chance of paying out if you had an accident. And that's what we're looking at. And yet women themselves are spending thousands and thousands of pounds on this, as are employers. And I think women need to have the facts before they go down that route.
But Miriam, that would be an absolutely correct thing to say if women were only freezing one egg. Around a 19% chance of a live birth. But on average, women freeze much more than one egg. I think many places recommend you freeze 15, which raises that chance of success very, very high. If a woman under the age of 35 freezes 15 eggs, she's got an 80% chance of a healthy young live birth. That's a much better success rate than just 20%.
Well, we have to look at the data in sequence here. So firstly, the average age of egg freezing is actually 37, 38, because before then, women don't really see the necessity of doing that. And of course, sadly, the natural decline of the health of those eggs means that eggs frozen at that age are far less likely to be successfully implanted as embryos. But also, yes, you can freeze 15 eggs, let's say, but of course, you only fertilise one or perhaps two at a time. The woman has to be pumped full of hormones, ready to receive that embryo. Then you have to implant the embryo and see if it takes. And don't forget, this is incredibly expensive. Now, the whole treatment from start to finish probably costs £8,000 or so. But each time you want to thaw another egg, fertilise another egg, implant another egg, it costs more money. And sadly, IVF, even in healthy young women using fresh embryos, their own eggs, only has a 20 or 30% chance of success each time. It's much, much lower for frozen eggs, frozen for a period of time and taken from women who are older. Now, that's not to say these treatments aren't important for many, many people. And of course, the research that's going into them is improving their success rate. But it's not fair to tell women who are nearing the end of their fertile life that they have this insurance policy that means that they can absolutely become a mother at any time they want. And then they find out later down the line that they've been sold effectively what is a lie for the vast majority, and that it won't actually result in what they're thinking it will.
Yeah, I think you're right to point this out, Miriam, that regardless of the individual statistics on how many eggs can be fertilised, what are the chances of having live birth, there is this assumption among some young women that whatever happens, whatever decisions they make or whatever comes their way, they will be able to have a child through some kind of scientific intervention, whether it's freezing your egg, IVF, whatever it is. And actually, unfortunately, because of the biological clock, It is difficult, and women have so many decisions to make in their lives, and it's so difficult to know what to do, when to have a child, if you want children, whether you've even got a partner to have one. But they shouldn't be selling a lie. It should come with the warning that this may, unfortunately, not work for you.
Yes, and in fact, the most likely outcome is that it won't work. I mean, that is clear from the data. But I think, there's a much bigger conversation to have here because, of course, there are some significant barriers that stop women having children when they want to and when they're most fertile. We can look at housing prices. That's an obvious thing, not finding a partner, all those things. There's definitely a role for government in that. But there is also a role for education. And I did some polling in September last year and found out that 70% of women think that it's actually OK to wait till 35 to start thinking about having a baby. And of course, sadly, that's just not true biologically. So I do think there's a role for better fertility education to help people just understand what the chances are. And it doesn't help that we have lots of stories of celebrities having babies in their late 40s. It gives this false impression that anyone can do that, which of course is just not true. And the chances are, sadly, that if you haven't had a baby by 30 or 40, you've got a much, much less than evens chance of becoming a mother. So it is about education. But of course, it's a much, much wider conversation that we need to be having about the kinds of barriers that there are and how we all, government included, try to break down some of those barriers.
Absolutely. It's an important point, an important discussion to have, particularly as the birth rate continues to decline in this country. Some really stark questions there. But Miriam, while we've got you here, we've got to talk about this speculation over the weekend about plots to remove the Prime Minister, about letters going in to Sir Graham Brady, about this Groundhog Day conversation it seems we've had ever since 2016. But Miriam Cates, have you put in a letter to Sir Graham Brady?
Look, I wouldn't tell you even if I had, because the whole point is it's secret. But I am not going to add to the speculation. I don't recognise the vast majority of the stories that have appeared in the press over the weekend. It seems to me a complete frenzy, particularly from the right-wing press. Look, the party's in a really, really difficult position. The polls are very clear. We know we've got an enormous task. But I would think back to 2 or 3 years ago when, unfortunately, Boris Johnson was toppled. Now, we can all have an argument about whether he was a good Prime Minister or not, but he had a mandate, he won an election, he was elected by the Conservative Party members. And unfortunately, that getting rid of Boris Johnson did set us on a path of this constant questions over leadership. And obviously, every individual Conservative MP has just got to, weigh up what the next move is.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much indeed, Miriam Cates, for joining us. Miriam Cates, MP. Gosh, my words come out. Miriam Cates.
But
not that difficult to say, is it?
As Miriam said, different MPs will have different responses to what's going on in the polls right now. And indeed, many people will have that discussion. I know these conversations are happening sort of in the corridors of power, sort of late at night, MPs talking to one another, thinking, gosh, what do we do? Each new relaunch, each new policy, each new budget doesn't seem to be shifting the dial.
Yeah, you can't really be polling at 18% and not be having these conversations. I mean, you've got to be realistic. Is there any way that they can turn around their chances when it comes down to it at the general election? Will the polling at the moment be reflected in that result? We shall.
Big questions.
May, November, June.
Maybe even January 25. But still to come, royal rumours are rife that the Princess of Wales has been seen out and about, doing some shopping as speculations continue to grow about her health. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain compared to average incomes has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you?
No,
Because you're profiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin,
have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system and say it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious.
We're being punished.
No, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Oh, you're good, as long as you stop whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help the old. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in two departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties that don't build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 to 3, and you've been getting in touch on the stories of today, particularly one question got you talking more than anything else. And this was, of course, the story that the V&A Museum in London has listed Margaret Thatcher alongside villains of history in a piece about Punch and Judy, saying that she's in line with Adolf Hitler or Osama bin Laden.
Totally normal. Totally normal. Dave says she was mainly evil. A couple of good things. Poll tax farce, right to buy is disaster for social housing. The people who bought the council houses lost them when interest rates rose. Cowboy builders, dodgy mortgages rampant, unemployed claiming and working also. The Thatcher years were great for the blind, deaf and dumb. Well, there you go.
Well, that's Dave. Keith says the best Prime Minister ever not. She put me in prison because I told her what to do with her poll tax. Well, Keith, if you choose to not pay a tax, you do go to prison. I don't think that should be particularly surprising. But my goodness, shall we just raise what Rod has written?
Go on then, what's Rod said?
I lived in a mining village through both disastrous mines and strikes, and I can tell you firsthand, it wasn't Thatcher who destroyed the communities. It was the communist-funded unions, the likes of Scargill, with their belief that the government would crumble. They led the miners and their families down a one-way road to oblivion.
And this one made me laugh. Mark says, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. Margaret Thatcher, she's still living in the left's head rent-free over 33 years after she left office. Yes, you know, love her or loathe her, she is an icon that very much lives on in the minds of the left, rent-free.
Perhaps you should finish with Lucy, who says, as a professional curator, I would first state that political views have no place in our museums and galleries. It did seem that it was a little bit political, didn't it?
Right, well, we're going to finish off the show. Thank you very much for your emails, by the way. We're going to finish off the show by speaking to royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Hadelman-Koo. Rafe, thank you for joining us. We've seen all sorts of headlines. Apparently there have been spottings of Princess Catherine at the Windsor farm shop. We don't have any evidence of this spotting of her. What do you say to it all? And has it got to the point where she should just be left alone?
Yes, leave the Princess of Wales alone, please. That is the message we're getting from the great British public. It's the way I personally feel. It's the emails that I'm getting. It's the Vox Pops that I've seen and the comments that I've seen on social media. I mean, we should be reassured, of course, that Her Royal Highness has been seen around in the Windsor Farm Shop. As you've said, no photographs, unfortunately, which won't do much to stop some of the more outlandish conspiracy theories. But I think most people will be heartened to know that Her Royal Highness is continuing to recover well and will be seen after Easter. And we should say, when we say after Easter, we're not talking about the Easter weekend, we're talking about the Easter school holidays. So around April the 17th is when that will happen, although I will be I'm pretty sure we will see Her Royal Highness again on Easter Sunday for the Easter Sunday service. And all of this means that everything we were told was going to happen is happening. We were told at the outset that the Princess of Wales would require 3 months of recovery and would be seen again after Easter. So Kate's absence from public life really shouldn't be causing so much drama and consternation.
Well, there we have it. 2 dates for our diary. Easter Sunday is the 31st of March, but if we don't see her then, that wouldn't be entirely surprising, given that 3-month timeline they set out. Rafe, you're saying the 17th of April is the one we should really be looking out for?
That's right, because of course we have the school holidays there, and it's on the 17th of April that the children return to their school near Ascot, and so I'm sure there'll be photographs then of Her Royal Highness perhaps taking them to their first day back at school.
Right, well, that's really good to know. 17th of April. I've written it down here and I've circled it twice. So, Rafe Hadelman-Koo, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock as normal, but it's Martin Dobney next. Martin, what's coming up on your fabulous show?
Well, if it's half as good as yours, I'll be happy. Rishi on the ropes. Of course, there's that historic debate, 8 o'clock tonight, the vote on Rwanda or bust. 23 points behind now to the Labour Party, and talk of a leadership challenge. Can it get any worse for the Prime Minister? Labour, meanwhile, seem to have a credible asylum plan. 1,000 people in getting people out of the country. It sounds like a good idea. We'll speak to Yvette Cooper on the channel. London's population is through the roof. Who want to live there? The answer is 10 million people. That's who. Got that coming on the show, 3 till 6. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast. And guess what? It's probably going to rain more.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the GB News forecast from the Met Office. It's a fine end to the day in the east with some bright sunshine, but turning cloudy in the west with outbreaks of rain heading in. Weather fronts out to the west already bringing thicker cloud into Northern Ireland, and those outbreaks of rain will soon sweep in and they'll push into western Scotland, western fringes of England as well as Wales. The wind picking up gales for exposed parts of western Scotland, and the rain by the end of the night reaching central and southeastern parts of the UK, but tending to fizzle out as it crosses the country. 10 Celsius by dawn, so the cloud, the wind and the rain tending to keep things relatively mild. But it will be a damp start to the day in many spots. However, soon enough, the cloud will lift and break. The rain clears to showers. Showers could occur just about anywhere, but most likely across the parts of the Midlands into the south of the UK. Some bright spells there for Northern Ireland and Scotland into the afternoon. Temperatures here 12 Celsius. Further south, mild again, 17 or 18 Celsius in the southeast. Wednesday, though, starts off on a damp note with outbreaks of rain pushing north into central parts of the UK, staying sunny in the far northwest and staying mostly dry in the far southeast. That rain clears to showers once again on Thursday and Friday, and it does turn a bit colder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
there's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package, including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a very happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. Today, GB News understands that the first migrants to be deported to Rwanda have already begun to be identified by the government as the infamous bill is debated once again today in the Commons. Can Rishi Sunak finally bring home the bacon and deliver on Rwanda? Next up, London population boom. New research has found that the capital has almost certainly surpassed its pre-pandemic peak of 10.1 million people and continues to climb. Is Britain finally overcrowded? And Rishi Sunak comes out fighting, saying he has a plan to boost British business. It comes as speculation over his future as Prime Minister grows and grows. Some Tory MPs are reported as wanting the Commons leader Penny Mordaunt to replace him. And it wouldn't be Easter without Easter weather chaos. Are we in for yet another wet Easter weekend this year? Certainly feels like it. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure. I've already been joined in the studio by this man, Brendan Clark-Smith. He's going to be giving his full reaction to a calamitous day in politics. Another vote on Rwanda in the Commons. Is it Rwanda or bust for Rishi Sunak? People, the vultures are circling Leadership challenges coming through, 40 letters now apparently in of no confidence on Rishi Sunak, and a 23-point poll deficit to the Labour Party. That poll dropped just about an hour and a quarter ago. Let us know what you think. Use your ways, gbviews@gbnews.com. Should they just get rid of Rishi Sunak and try for a new leader, or is it just too late and the party needs to stand united? Let me know what your thoughts are. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.